My name is Amber Sullivan, and I was 28 years old when my father stared at me like he'd seen a ghost and asked, "Why are you still alive?" It happened at my sister Cassandra's wedding, 3 years after my family left me for dead. The car accident that should have killed me became my unexpected freedom from a family that chose my sister and my boyfriend over me. They never looked for me, used my death for their gain, and moved on without a second thought. Before I tell you what happened when I crashed my sister's wedding, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about family karma coming full circle. Growing up in the affluent Sullivan household in Brookline, a prestigious suburb of Boston, my childhood seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Our sprawling colonial home with its manicured lawn and heated swimming pool was the envy of the neighborhood. My father, James Sullivan, had built a successful construction company from the ground up, specializing in luxury commercial properties throughout New England. My mother, Heather, devoted herself to climbing the social ladder of Boston's elite, hosting charity galas and joining all the right committees. I was the firstborn, and for 5 blissful years, I had my parents' undivided attention. Then came Cassandra, my little sister. Those early years were wonderful, I adored her instantly. I can still picture her toddling after me in the backyard, her blonde curls bouncing as she tried to keep up with her big sister. I taught her how to tie her shoes, helped her with finger painting, and read her bedtime stories. We built blanket forts in the living room and put on plays for our parents, who applauded enthusiastically from the sofa. "You girls are inseparable," our mother would say proudly to her friends over brunch. "Amber is such a wonderful big sister." Elementary school passed in a happy blur. Cassandra and I walked to the bus stop together every morning, matching lunch boxes swinging in our hands. I protected her from playground bullies and helped her with homework. When she struggled with reading, I created flashcards and games to make learning fun. Every night, we'd sneak into each other's rooms after bedtime to whisper secrets and giggle until one of our parents came to separate us. Things began to shift subtly when I entered middle school. Cassandra was still in elementary, and the separation created the first small gap between us. I was excelling academically, bringing home straight A's and winning the science fair with my project on renewable energy. While my parents certainly praised my achievements, I noticed their special excitement when it came to Cassandra's developing talents. At 11, Cassandra entered her first beauty pageant at my mother's encouragement. I sat in the audience, genuinely cheering as she twirled across the stage in a sparkly blue dress. When she won runner-up, my parents couldn't stop talking about it for weeks. They framed her pageant photo and placed it prominently on the piano, alongside my academic certificates that seemed to fade into the background. "She's a natural performer," my father would tell visitors, beaming with pride. "Got her mother's grace and beauty." By high school, the pattern had solidified. I continued to excel academically, joining debate team and mock trial, winning writing competitions, and securing a spot as editor of the school newspaper. Cassandra blossomed into what my mother called a true Sullivan beauty, winning pageant after pageant and becoming the most popular girl in her grade. Our paths diverged further. I spent weekends studying and volunteering at the local library's literacy program. Cassandra attended modeling workshops and social events with my mother's country club friends. The sisterly bond remained, but it had thinned considerably. "You're so lucky to be smart," Cassandra would say, as if beauty and intelligence were mutually exclusive. "I got the looks, you got the brains." She didn't seem to notice how this dichotomy, reinforced by our parents, created an unspoken competition between us. When college acceptance letters arrived my senior year, I was thrilled to receive a full academic scholarship to Northeastern University. My parents hosted a dinner celebration, but conversation quickly turned to Cassandra's upcoming pageant. I didn't mind then, I was too excited about college and the independence it promised. Northeastern opened a new world for me. I double majored in graphic design and marketing, finding my passion at the intersection of art and business. In my sophomore year, I met Jason in a digital media class. Tall, with thoughtful brown eyes and a quiet confidence, he was different from the boisterous Boston boys I'd grown up around. Our relationship blossomed slowly. We began as study partners, meeting at coffee shops to review notes and discuss projects. Friendship evolved into romance after he invited me to an underground art exhibition downtown. Standing before an abstract installation, he tentatively took my hand, and everything clicked into place. Jason became a fixture at Sullivan family dinners by junior year. My parents seemed to approve, especially my father, who appreciated Jason's interest in business and entrepreneurship. Cassandra, now a freshman at Boston University, was polite but distant around him, often leaving early to meet with friends. "Your boyfriend's cute," she commented once, with an evaluating look that made me slightly uncomfortable. Very serious, though. After graduation, I landed a job at a marketing firm downtown. Jason and I found a small apartment in Cambridge, with a bay window overlooking the Charles River. We furnished it with second-hand finds and made plans for the future. Maybe graduate school for me, perhaps starting our own business together someday. The last truly happy family gathering was my 25th birthday dinner. We celebrated at my parents' home, with my mother preparing my favorite meal of salmon and roasted vegetables. Cassandra gave me a silver bracelet, and my parents presented me with a set of professional art supplies. To our brilliant daughter, my father toasted, raising his wine glass. Making the Sullivan name proud in the business world. Jason squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt completely content. I had my career beginning to take off, a loving boyfriend, and despite the subtle favoritism, a family that seemed proud of me in their own way. I had no idea that within a month, everything would shatter beyond repair. It started with a text message that wasn't meant for me. Jason had left his phone on our kitchen counter while showering one Sunday morning. When it chimed repeatedly, I glanced over, thinking it might be work-related. Instead, I saw Cassandra's name lighting up the screen, along with message previews that made my stomach drop. "Last night was amazing," one read. "Still thinking about your hands on me." My fingers trembled as I picked up the phone. I stood frozen in our sunny kitchen, scrolling through weeks of messages between my sister and my boyfriend. Flirtatious exchanges. Meeting arrangements. Photos I couldn't bring myself to open. The timestamps revealed they'd been seeing each other for nearly 3 months. When Jason emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist and hair dripping, he found me sitting at the kitchen table, his phone placed deliberately in front of me. "Amber?" His voice faltered when he saw my expression. "How long?" I asked quietly. "What are you talking about?" The fake confusion in his voice only twisted the knife deeper. I pushed the phone toward him. "Don't lie to me. You and Cassandra." "How long?" His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, then resignation. He sat heavily in the chair across from me. "It's not what you think," he began, the classic opening line of Cheaters Everywhere. "Don't insult me by lying," I interrupted. "I read enough to know exactly what it is." Jason ran his hands through his damp hair. "It just happened. We didn't plan it." 3 months isn't just happening, Jason. That's a deliberate affair. He had the audacity to look wounded. "There's a connection between us that just... I don't know how to explain it." "A connection," I repeated flatly. "With my sister. You've been so busy with work, and we started talking when I came to your parents' house that weekend you were in New York for the conference. One thing led to another." I stood up abruptly. "I'm going to see Cassandra." "Amber, wait." I didn't wait. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to my parents' house, where Cassandra still lived while attending graduate school. My mind raced with questions. How could my sister betray me like this? Had they laughed about me behind my back? Was everyone aware except me? I found Cassandra in the backyard by the pool, sunbathing in a white bikini, looking impossibly perfect even in her betrayal. She sat up when my shadow fell across her, pushing designer sunglasses to the top of her head. "Amber? What's wrong? You look terrible." "You and Jason," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "How could you?" Unlike Jason, she didn't bother denying it. Instead, a small, almost triumphant smile played at her lips. "He came to me, you know," she said. "He was bored with you." Her casual cruelty stole my breath. "He's my boyfriend. You're my sister." She shrugged, rearranging herself on the lounger. "We can't help who we fall for, Amber. Jason and I have something special." "Something special?" I echoed in disbelief. "You betrayed me in the worst possible way." "Don't be so dramatic. It's not like you were going to marry him." But I had been thinking about forever with Jason. We'd talked about it in abstract terms, someday, when we were more established. I'd imagined him proposing by the Charles River where we often walked. All those dreams now seemed like naive delusions. Our raised voices had drawn attention. The sliding glass door opened, and our parents stepped onto the patio, wearing matching expressions of concern. "What's going on out here?" my father demanded. I turned to them, desperate for parental justice. "Cassandra has been sleeping with Jason behind my back for months." I expected shock, outrage on my behalf. Instead, my mother sighed and gave me a look of weary disappointment. "Amber, must you make such a scene? The neighbors will hear." My father frowned. "Let's take this inside." In the kitchen, I waited for someone, anyone, to acknowledge the magnitude of this betrayal. Instead, my mother busied herself making iced tea as if we were discussing nothing more dramatic than weekend plans. "I don't understand," I said, looking between my parents. "Why aren't you upset with Cassandra?" My mother placed a glass in front of me that I didn't touch. "These things happen, dear. Relationships end. This isn't just a breakup. My sister and my boyfriend have been having an affair." My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps if you hadn't been so focused on your career and paid more attention to Jason's needs." I stared at him in shock. "Are you saying this is my fault?" "James," my mother cautioned, but without real conviction. "I'm just saying," he continued, "that men have certain needs. If you weren't woman enough to keep him interested." "I can't believe what I'm hearing," I interrupted, tears burning in my eyes. My mother patted my hand. "Darling, sometimes we must look at our own part in these situations. If you'd put more effort into your appearance, like Cassandra." "More effort?" I pulled my hand away. "I've been working 60-hour weeks building my career." "And that's commendable," she said with a condescending smile. "But men like Jason need to feel prioritized." Cassandra remained silent throughout this exchange, examining her manicure with detached interest. When she finally spoke, her words dripped with false sympathy. "It's not your fault you're so intense, Amber. Some men find that intimidating. Jason needs someone more easygoing." That evening, over a horrific family dinner that my mother insisted we all attend to clear the air, the betrayal was cemented. Jason had been invited, my mother's idea, and sat beside Cassandra, occasionally throwing apologetic glances my way that meant nothing. "We might as well address the elephant in the room," my father announced after pouring himself a third scotch. "Jason and Cassandra have formed an attachment. These things happen, and holding grudges isn't productive." "An attachment?" I repeated incredulously. "They cheated." "Amber," my mother chided, "this attitude isn't helping anyone. We're all adults here." As the meal progressed, it became abundantly clear where everyone's loyalties lay. My parents spoke warmly to Jason about his career prospects, my father even hinting at a possible position in his company. Cassandra placed her hand over Jason's on the table, a territorial gesture that no one but me seemed to find inappropriate. When dessert was served, Cassandra's favorite tiramisu, not the chocolate cake that had always been mine, I finally understood. I wasn't just losing my boyfriend and sister. I was losing my entire family, who had chosen Cassandra, as they always had in subtle ways throughout our lives. This time, there was nothing subtle about it. I stood up, my untouched dessert a sad metaphor for my place in this family. "I hope you'll all be very happy together," I said, voice breaking despite my attempt at dignity. I left without looking back, their voices fading as the front door closed behind me. In my car, the tears finally came, hot and uncontrollable. Rain had started to fall, mirroring the storm inside me as I pulled away from the house where I no longer belonged. The coastal road north of Boston was treacherous in good weather. In a pounding rainstorm, with tears blurring my vision, it was a death trap. I should have pulled over, should have waited until morning, should have gone anywhere but on that winding cliffside highway. But rational thought had abandoned me hours ago. My windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the torrential downpour. The radio weatherman warned of flash flooding and advised all drivers to stay off the roads. I barely registered his words, my mind replaying the dinner scene in endless, torturous loops. The way Cassandra leaned into Jason. My father's dismissive tone. My mother's disappointed sighs. I didn't see the oncoming truck until its high beams cut through the rain like searchlights. It had drifted slightly over the center line, or maybe I had. I swerved hard to avoid a collision, my tires losing traction on the slick asphalt. The steering wheel jerked in my hands as the car hydroplaned. Time slowed in that terrifying moment. I felt the sickening sensation of weightlessness as my sedan broke through the guardrail and went airborne. Below, angry waves crashed against jagged rocks. My scream was swallowed by the storm as the car plummeted toward the Atlantic. The impact knocked me unconscious. I came to underwater, disoriented and in complete darkness. Cold water rushed into the car, rising rapidly around me. Panic surged through my body, adrenaline clearing my mind enough to remember the emergency windowbreaker in my glove compartment, a gift from my safety-conscious aunt years ago that I'd never thought I'd use. With the window shattered, I fought against the incoming current and pushed myself out into the raging sea. The car disappeared below me, swallowed by the depths. I was alone in the storm-tossed ocean, battered by waves and pulled by currents I couldn't fight. I don't remember how long I struggled before losing consciousness again. By some miracle, the tide carried my limp body miles down the coast rather than out to sea. I washed up on a small, rocky beach near a cluster of vacation cottages, most vacant during the off-season. Miles and Dorothy Campbell, a retired couple in their 70s, had decided to brave the autumn chill for a weekend at their beach house. Dorothy spotted what she initially thought was debris on the shore during her morning walk with their golden retriever. I thought she was dead, Dorothy later told me. You were so pale, so still. But then Murphy, that's our dog, started licking your face, and you made this tiny sound. I've never run so fast in my life to get miles. I woke up 3 days later in County Hospital, connected to machines monitoring my vital signs. My body was a catalog of injuries: 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, a dislocated shoulder, a severe concussion, and countless cuts and bruises. Worst of all was the damage to my vocal cords from water inhalation and trauma. I couldn't speak above a hoarse whisper. A kind-faced nurse noticed my open eyes and called for the doctor. They explained my condition, told me I was lucky to be alive, and asked for my name and emergency contacts. I tried to respond, but my damaged voice failed me. There was no identification in the hospital, everything had been lost in the sea. Later that day, still unable to communicate effectively, I watched a local news report that changed everything. My car had been recovered from the ocean, crushed and empty. The reporter stood at the scene of the accident, the broken guardrail behind her. Authorities believe that Amber Sullivan, 25, was killed when her vehicle plunged into the Atlantic during Monday night's severe storm. No body has been recovered, but given the dangerous currents and the time elapsed, police have declared this a recovery rather than a rescue operation. The camera cut to a brief statement from my family, standing outside our home. My father, stern-faced and dry-eyed, spoke in clipped sentences about the tragic accident. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief but appeared more composed than grieving. Cassandra stood slightly apart, her expression unreadable. Jason wasn't present. The Sullivan family asks for privacy during this difficult time, my father concluded, already turning back toward the house before the camera cut away. Not one of them looked devastated. Not one of them demanded that the search continue. They had written me off as quickly and decisively as they had chosen Cassandra over me at that final dinner. Something broke inside me as I watched their performance. A strange calm replaced my initial shock. These people, who shared my blood but had never truly been on my side, believed I was dead. And in that moment, I decided to let them continue believing it. When the elderly nurse returned to check my vitals, I managed to scrawl on a notepad, "No family. No one to call." It wasn't entirely a lie. The family I had was as good as dead to me now. For 2 weeks, I recovered in that hospital room, gradually regaining my voice but offering only vague details about myself. I claimed memory loss from the trauma, a convenient explanation the doctors found plausible given my head injury. Social services began making arrangements for my case, but before they could dig too deeply, Miles and Dorothy Campbell reappeared. "We've been thinking," Dorothy said, sitting beside my bed and taking my hand in hers. "Our cottage has a small guest house that's just sitting empty. You need somewhere to recuperate, and we could use some help around the property. Would you consider staying with us until you get back on your feet?" I looked into her kind eyes, so different from my mother's calculating gaze, and felt tears spill down my cheeks. These strangers offered more compassion than my own family had shown me in years. Miles cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with emotion but equally determined. "We won't pry into your business. Everyone's entitled to their privacy. But nobody should be alone after what you've been through." 3 days later, I left the hospital as Jane Doe and moved into the Campbells' guest house by the sea. The irony wasn't lost on me that the ocean that nearly killed me had also delivered me to the doorstep of the first truly nurturing home I'd known. During my months with Miles and Dorothy, I healed, physically and emotionally. My fractured bones mended. My voice returned, though with a slightly huskier quality than before. The nightmares about drowning gradually subsided. One evening, as we shared dinner in their cozy kitchen, Dorothy gently broached the subject we'd all been avoiding. "You know, dear, at some point you'll need proper identification to move forward. Social Security, driver's license." "I know," I replied, staring into my soup. "Miles has a friend who used to work in administration," she continued carefully. "He might be able to help sort things out, discreetly." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "You know I'm not really Jane Doe, don't you?" Dorothy patted my hand. "We suspected there was more to your story. We've respected your privacy, but we also want you to have a future." That night, I made a decision. Amber Sullivan had died in that ocean. I would build a new life with a new name. Not out of fear or shame, but because the universe had given me a rare opportunity, a clean slate. With Miles' friend's help, I obtained a new Social Security card and driver's license under the name Amber Lawrence. It wasn't entirely legal, but it wasn't entirely fraudulent either. I was still Amber, just with a different surname and birth date. When spring arrived, I thanked the Campbells for their extraordinary kindness and promised to stay in touch. With my small savings from before the accident and a modest loan from my adoptive grandparents, I boarded a bus headed west. As the Massachusetts coastline receded behind me, I felt something unexpected: freedom. Portland, Oregon seemed as far from Boston as I could get while remaining in the continental United States. The perpetually overcast sky matched my mood those first few weeks, but the city's quirky personality and progressive atmosphere offered anonymity and opportunity in equal measure. I found a tiny studio apartment in the Southeast District, in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and tall windows that let in what little sunlight Portland had to offer. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood walkable, and most importantly, no one knew me or my history. With my background in graphic design and marketing, I began freelancing under my new identity. I created a portfolio website, reached out to local businesses, and gradually built a client base. The work was inconsistent at first, a logo design here, a promotional flyer there, but it paid the bills and gave me purpose. In those early days, loneliness was my constant companion. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text a friend back in Boston, only to remember that Amber Sullivan's friends belonged to a life that no longer existed. At night, I'd scroll through social media using an anonymous account, glimpsing my former world from a distance. My parents had posted a tasteful memorial photo. Cassandra shared vague platitudes about loss and moving forward. Jason had the decency to remain silent. 3 months into my Portland life, I began seeing a therapist named Dr. Martinez. During our first session, I revealed my true identity and the circumstances that brought me across the country. "You've experienced extraordinary trauma," she said, her expression compassionate but not pitying. "Not just the accident, but the betrayal beforehand." "Sometimes I feel guilty," I admitted. "For letting them think I'm dead." "Why do you think you feel that guilt?" I considered the question. "Because it's what I was taught to feel. That I should always put their needs before mine, even when they didn't deserve it." Dr. Martinez became my guide through the complicated landscape of family trauma, helping me understand the dynamics that had shaped our relationships. We unpacked the years of subtle favoritism, the ways I'd been conditioned to minimize my own needs, and the freedom that came with building an identity separate from the Sullivan name. "Your family made their choice," she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. "You're making yours now. That's not revenge, it's self-preservation." 6 months into my Portland life, I met Claire at a local coffee shop where I often worked. She spilled her latte on my sketchbook, apologized profusely, and insisted on buying me a replacement drink. By the time our coffees arrived, we were deep in conversation about independent bookstores and the merits of rain boots versus umbrellas in Portland weather. Claire introduced me to her friend Marcus, a web developer who occasionally collaborated with me on client projects. The three of us formed a tight-knit group, spending weekends exploring Portland's food carts, hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, and attending indie film screenings. They knew me only as Amber Lawrence, graphic designer and East Coast transplant. I shared edited versions of my past, keeping the core of my story intact while omitting the details that would reveal my true identity. "You're an enigma, Lawrence," Marcus teased one evening as we shared beers at a local brewery. "Always dodging questions about your hometown." "I told you, I grew up outside Boston," I replied, sticking to my practiced story. "Yeah, but you never talk about your family," Claire observed. "It's always when I was in college or back on the East Coast. Never my mom says or my dad thinks." I took a long sip of my beer. Not everyone has picture-perfect families worth talking about. Something in my tone must have signaled this was a boundary, because neither pushed further. That was the beauty of these friendships, they accepted me as I was now, without needing to reconcile me with who I had been. As my client list grew, I decided to focus on branding for small businesses and startups. I rented a small office space in a creative co-working building downtown and hired a part-time assistant. Amber Lawrence Design became known for clean, innovative visuals and personal attention to clients' needs. For the first time in my life, I was building something that was entirely mine, without family expectations shadowing my success. Nearly 2 years after the accident, I felt ready to try dating again. Michael, an environmental lawyer I met through a client, asked me to dinner after our third professional meeting. He was kind, intelligent, and refreshingly straightforward. On our first date, he talked about his passion for conservation and asked thoughtful questions about my work. There was no game playing, no hidden agenda. "I'm not looking for anything complicated," I told him over dessert. "My last relationship ended badly." "I appreciate honesty," he replied with a warm smile. "How about we keep it simple? Good food, good conversation, and see where it goes." Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately. Michael respected my privacy and never pressed when I changed the subject away from my past. We enjoyed the present together, hiking Mount Hood, attending jazz festivals, cooking elaborate meals in his apartment. When he eventually told me he was falling in love with me, I was surprised by my capacity to feel that emotion again. "You don't have to say it back," he assured me, noticing my hesitation. "I just wanted you to know." 3 weeks later, I did say it back, because it was true. Loving Michael wasn't the all-consuming passion I'd felt for Jason, it was calmer, steadier, built on mutual respect rather than desperate need. It felt like healing. Throughout this period of rebuilding, I continued creating art for myself, separate from my commercial work. Late at night, I would paint or sketch, processing my emotions through abstract forms and vivid colors. These pieces were private, therapeutic, until Claire convinced me to display a few in a local cafe where her friend worked as a manager. To my surprise, someone bought the first piece within a week. Then another. The cafe owner asked if I'd consider a small exhibition. Terrified but exhilarated, I agreed. The showing was modest but successful, with several pieces selling to local art collectors. A small write-up appeared in Portland's Arts Weekly, praising the emotional depth and resilience evident in my work. I kept the clipping in my desk drawer, a tangible reminder of how far I'd come. Life had found a new rhythm: work, friends, art, and Michael. My therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez became monthly check-ins rather than weekly necessities. The nightmares about drowning had ceased, replaced occasionally by dreams of flying. I had created a life that felt authentic and meaningful. Then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Claire burst into my office, tablet in hand. "You'll never believe what I just saw," she said, placing the device in front of me. On the screen was Boston Magazine's Society page. The headline read, "Sullivan Construction Heir to Wed Boston University Sweetheart." Below was a professional engagement photo of Cassandra and Jason, looking polished and pleased with themselves. "Isn't Sullivan the construction company that built that controversial development on the harbor?" Claire asked, oblivious to my suddenly pale face. "The one that collapsed that environmental protection thing?" I couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt as I stared at their smiling faces. 3 years had passed since the accident. 3 years of building a new life, of healing, of moving forward. Yet seeing them together, officially celebrating what had begun in betrayal, reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. "Amber? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I managed. "Just a migraine coming on suddenly." After Claire left, I sat alone in my office, the tablet still open to their engagement announcement. I read the flowery description of their college sweetheart's romance, the details of Cassandra's massive diamond ring, the plans for a June wedding at Boston's most exclusive venue. Not a word about me. Not a single acknowledgement of the relationship that had existed before theirs, or the sister who had supposedly died tragically. In the carefully crafted narrative of their love story, I had been completely erased. That night, I told Michael I wasn't feeling well and needed to be alone. Instead of going home, I drove to the coast, finding a deserted stretch of beach where I could face the same ocean that had nearly claimed my life, the Pacific instead of the Atlantic, but dark water nonetheless. Standing at the edge of the continent, waves lapping at my feet, I made a decision. I would no longer allow them to write me out of existence. It was time for Amber Sullivan to rise from the dead. "Are you sure you want to see this?" Claire asked, concern evident in her voice as she handed me her laptop. We were sitting in my apartment a week after she'd shown me the engagement announcement. Following my beach epiphany, I'd confided a heavily edited version of my history to Claire, that Cassandra was my estranged sister who had stolen my boyfriend, leading to my relocation across the country. I omitted the accident and my presumed death, explaining only that I'd cut contact with my toxic family. "I need to know more," I insisted, taking the computer. Claire had become my investigator, using her journalism background to dig into the Sullivan family's current status. The screen displayed Boston's most exclusive lifestyle magazine, open to a feature on upcoming society weddings. Cassandra and Jason's announcement occupied a full page. The couple will wed on June 12 at St. Cecilia's Cathedral, followed by a reception at the Sullivan Estate in Brookline, I read aloud. The bride, a graduate of Boston University's School of Communication, is the daughter of prominent developer James Sullivan and philanthropist Heather Sullivan. My throat tightened as I continued. The Sullivan family is well known for their resilience following the tragic loss of their eldest daughter in 2021. This wedding represents new beginnings and the joy that can follow grief, the mother of the bride told our reporter. "Wow," Claire said softly. "They're really milking your death for sympathy points." I closed the laptop, unable to read more. The hypocrisy was staggering, my mother positioning herself as the grieving parent overcoming tragedy, when in reality, they had written me off even before my supposed death. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions and suppressed anger. At my emergency therapy session the next day, Dr. Martinez listened patiently as I unloaded my frustration. I feel like they're getting away with everything, I said, pacing her office. They betrayed me, then used my death to garner sympathy and business connections. Now they're celebrating this relationship that began with cheating, and I'm supposed to just watch from across the country? What do you want to happen, Amber? She asked calmly. The question stopped me mid-pace. I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want them to face the consequences of their actions. And what would those consequences look like to you? I sank into the chair across from her. I don't know. I just know I'm tired of being erased. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. There's a difference between seeking justice and seeking revenge. One is about restoring balance, the other about inflicting pain. Which am I doing? I asked quietly. Only you can answer that, she replied. But I'd suggest examining your motivations carefully before you take any action. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into research, spending late nights scouring the internet for information about my family. What I discovered was illuminating. My father's construction company had expanded dramatically in the past 3 years, securing several major government contracts. Press releases mentioned the family's perseverance through personal tragedy. My mother had been appointed to prestigious charity boards, her biography always noting her strength in the face of losing her eldest daughter. Most disturbing was the discovery that my father had collected a substantial life insurance policy after my death, money that had reportedly been invested in the company's expansion. Jason now held a senior position in the firm, his rapid rise through the ranks coinciding with his relationship with Cassandra. They had not only moved on from me, they had profited from my absence. The nightmares returned, but different now. Instead of drowning, I dreamed of standing invisible at family gatherings, screaming while no one heard me. I would wake gasping, Michael's concerned face hovering over me in the darkness. You've been different lately, he observed one morning over coffee. Is everything okay? I considered telling him the full truth but hesitated. Our relationship was good, solid. Did I want to risk changing how he saw me by revealing my complicated past? Family stuff, I answered vaguely. Some old wounds reopening. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Whatever it is, I'm here. When you're ready to talk about it. His unconditional support only strengthened my resolve. I needed closure, not just for myself, but for any future I hoped to build with Michael or anyone else. The past would continue haunting me until I confronted it directly. One evening, Claire came over with a bottle of wine and her determination to help. So, she said, pouring generous glasses for both of us, are we going to this wedding or what? I nearly choked mid-sip. What? The wedding. Your sister's wedding. She set down her glass. Look, I've known something was off about your family story from day one. Normal people don't move across the country and completely reinvent themselves over a breakup. Whatever happened in Boston was major, and now you have a chance to face it. You think I should crash my sister's wedding? The idea was simultaneously terrifying and appealing. I think you should stop letting these people live rent-free in your head. Go there, say what you need to say, and then come back to the life you built here. She took a long sip of wine. And I'm coming with you for moral support. The plan began to take shape that night, fueled by wine and years of suppressed emotions. I would attend the wedding ceremony, sit quietly in the back, observe but not disrupt. At the reception, I would approach my family privately, away from guests. I would speak my truth, then leave them to deal with the fallout. This isn't about revenge, I told Claire, though perhaps I was trying to convince myself. It's about reclaiming my narrative. Whatever you say, honey, she replied skeptically. Just promise me we get to stay in a fancy hotel while we're there. Over the next week, I made arrangements, booked flights and hotel rooms, requested time off work, asked Michael to watch my apartment. I told him only that I needed to handle some family business in Boston, promising to explain everything upon my return. The night before our departure, I stood before my closet, considering what one wears to return from the dead. I finally settled on a fitted emerald dress that highlighted my now athletic frame. 3 years of Pacific Northwest hiking had changed my formerly soft physique. I looked different in other ways too. My once long hair now cut into a modern bob, subtle highlights lightening my naturally dark brown color. Stress and survival had etched fine lines around my eyes that hadn't been there at 25. Would they even recognize me? Or had I been so thoroughly erased from their consciousness that I could stand before them as a stranger? In my carry-on, I packed evidence of my family's exploitation of my death, insurance documents, press clippings, screenshots of interviews. I wasn't sure if I would use them, but their presence gave me courage. This wasn't just an emotional confrontation, there were genuine ethical and potentially legal issues at play. As our plane took off from Portland International Airport the next morning, Claire squeezed my hand. Ready or not, Boston, here comes Amber Sullivan, back from the dead. I managed a smile despite my churning stomach. Actually, it's still Amber Lawrence. Amber Sullivan really did die in that ocean. I'm just going to finally lay her to rest properly. Boston in June was exactly as I remembered, humid, historic, and haughty. As our taxi wound through familiar streets toward our downtown hotel, I felt a strange doubling of identity. Every landmark triggered memories: the public garden where I'd studied during college, the corner cafe where Jason and I had shared our first coffee, the boutique where my mother had insisted on buying my graduation dress. You okay? Claire asked, noticing my silence. Just ghosts, I replied, watching my past life scroll by the window. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock the following day. We spent the intervening time exploring the city, Claire wide-eyed at landmarks I'd once taken for granted. I kept my sunglasses on and hair tucked under a cap, irrationally afraid of being recognized by someone from my former life. That night, I barely slept. By morning, my resolve wavered. Was I making a catastrophic mistake? Would confronting my family bring closure or just new trauma? I texted Dr. Martinez, who responded with measured wisdom. Whatever you decide, remember that their reaction doesn't define your worth. You're seeking acknowledgement, not approval. Those words became my mantra as Claire and I prepared for the wedding. She wore a tasteful blue dress that wouldn't draw attention. I donned my emerald ensemble, applied makeup with a steadier hand than I felt, and slipped on the silver bracelet Cassandra had given me for my last birthday, a deliberate choice, a small talisman of the sister she had once been. St. Cecilia's Cathedral stood imposing against the clear June sky, its Gothic spires reaching toward heaven like accusing fingers. We arrived as guests were being seated, joining the stream of Boston elite entering the church. No one questioned our presence, we were well-dressed, confident, and carried small gift bags like everyone else. Remember, Claire whispered as we slipped into a pew at the very back, we're just here to observe during the ceremony. No dramatic interruptions during the speak now or forever hold your peace part. I'm not planning to make a scene, I assured her, though my pounding heart suggested otherwise. The cathedral filled with Boston's upper crust, I recognized many faces from my previous life, now older but still draped in privilege and pearls. My parents' friends, business associates, cousins I'd grown up with, all gathered to celebrate a union built on betrayal, none of them aware of my presence in their midst. When the music changed and the processional began, I gripped Claire's hand so tightly she winced. The groomsmen came first, Jason's college friends I'd once known well. Then Jason himself, handsome in his tuxedo, his face a mask of appropriate solemnity. Had he ever felt genuine remorse for his betrayal, or had I been so easily replaced that guilt never found purchase? My parents followed, my father distinguished in a tailored suit, my mother resplendent in pale blue silk, both beaming with pride. They looked prosperous and pleased, showing no trace of the grief they'd leveraged in interviews and press releases. Then came Cassandra. My breath caught. My sister floated down the aisle on our father's arm, a vision in traditional white. Her gown was a masterpiece of lace and crystal, her veil shimmering in the cathedral lighting. She had always been beautiful, but today she was transcendent, radiating happiness and certainty. For a flickering moment, I felt a shadow of our childhood bond, pride in her beauty, joy for her happiness. Then reality reasserted itself. This pristine bride had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, then stepped into my absence without a backward glance. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp Boston Catholicism could muster. I remained frozen in my pew, watching this alternate reality where I had never existed play out before me. Vows were exchanged, rings presented, a kiss shared. The congregation applauded as the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, passing within 15 feet of where I sat, neither of them glancing in my direction. Phase 1 complete, Claire murmured as we joined the exodus toward the reception. You doing okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. We followed the directions to the Sullivan estate in Brookline, arriving among a stream of luxury vehicles. The sprawling property had been transformed for the occasion, white tents dotted the manicured lawn, floral arrangements cascaded from every surface, champagne flowed freely from multiple bars. We accepted glasses from passing servers and found a quiet corner to observe. The reception was in full swing, with the first dances completed and guests now mingling freely. My parents worked the crowd like politicians, accepting congratulations and making introductions. Cassandra and Jason moved through the space as a unit, the perfect couple receiving their due adoration. So what's the plan? Claire asked after an hour of surveillance. We can't just stand here all night. She was right. It was time. I scanned the tent until I located my mother, momentarily alone near a floral arrangement, checking something on her phone. Taking a deep breath, I handed Claire my champagne glass. Wait here. I'm going to start with my mother. I approached slowly, giving myself time to retreat if courage failed. She didn't look up from her phone until I was directly before her, close enough to smell her familiar Chanel perfume. Excuse me, I said softly. Yes, one moment, she replied absently, finishing her text before raising her eyes. The transformation of her expression would have been comical under different circumstances. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and fear chased across her perfectly made-up face. Her phone slipped from her fingers, clattering on the marble cocktail table. Hello, Mother, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Amber, she whispered, one manicured hand rising to her throat. Is it, how are you? Alive? I finished for her. Disappointed? Her mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish suddenly finding itself on land. Before she could recover, my father appeared at her side, frowning at her obvious distress. Heather, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a... His words died as he turned to follow her gaze. The color drained from his face so rapidly I feared he might faint. Why are you still alive? He finally managed, the words escaping before he could censor them. There it was, the question that revealed everything. Not, how are you alive, or, thank God you're alive, but why? The naked displeasure in his voice confirmed everything I'd suspected about my family's true feelings regarding my death. I survived the accident, I stated simply. Though clearly that's not the outcome you were hoping for. My mother found her voice, though it trembled. Amber, darling, that's not, we mourned you. We were devastated. Were you? I asked. Because from what I've seen, my death was quite convenient for everyone. Dad's business expanded using my life insurance money. Mom joined all the right charity boards as the sympathetic grieving mother. Cassandra and Jason got to be together without the inconvenience of acknowledging their betrayal. My father's shock was hardening into something more calculated. He glanced around, confirming that we were relatively isolated from the main crowd. This is neither the time nor place for such accusations, he hissed. You've clearly suffered some kind of breakdown. Let us get you help. I've had plenty of help, I replied. 3 years of therapy to process being betrayed by my boyfriend, my sister, and my parents all at once. I'm actually doing quite well now. My mother's eyes darted nervously around the tent. James, people will notice. We need to. She was interrupted by the sound of shattering glass. We turned to see Jason standing frozen several feet away, the broken champagne flute at his feet, his face ashen. Behind him, Cassandra appeared, drawn by the commotion. Jason, what's wrong with? Her words faltered as she followed his gaze to me. Her perfectly made-up face contorted in disbelief, mascara-rimmed eyes widening in shock. Surprise, sister dear, I said, the words tasting both bitter and sweet. Sorry, I didn't RSVP. Cassandra's hand flew to her mouth. This isn't possible. You're dead. We had a funeral. An empty casket funeral, I corrected. Very tasteful, I heard. Though I notice you wore blue instead of black, always your best color, right? Guests were beginning to notice the disturbance. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people recognized me despite the years and changes. I heard my name repeated in hushed, incredulous tones. My father grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. We're taking this inside. Now. I allowed myself to be steered toward the house, Claire materializing at my side. I'm coming too, she stated in a tone that brooked no argument. In my father's wood-paneled study, unchanged from my childhood, the confrontation continued. Cassandra had progressed from shock to tears, her perfect bridal makeup streaming down her face. Jason stood apart, looking like he might be sick. My parents positioned themselves as a united front, quickly transitioning from shock to damage control. Where have you been? My mother demanded. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? What you've been through? I repeated incredulously. You all moved on within weeks. I saw the interviews, the press releases. The Sullivan family, bravely continuing despite tragedy. You used my death for sympathy and business advantages. That's absurd, my father blustered. We grieved you. Really? Because your first words to me were, why are you still alive? Not exactly the reaction of a grieving father. Cassandra stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling. You disappeared for 3 years, letting us think you were dead, and now you show up at my wedding? How could you be so cruel? The audacity of her accusation left me momentarily speechless. Claire filled the silence. Wow. That's rich coming from the woman who slept with her sister's boyfriend, then enjoyed all the perks of being the only daughter after her sister's tragic accident. Cassandra flinched as if slapped. Jason finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Amber, we thought you were gone. The police found your car. I survived, I said flatly. No thanks to any of you. Not one of you questioned when they couldn't find my body. Not one of you demanded they keep searching. You all just accepted it and moved on to your more convenient lives without me. My father's tactical mind was clearly working overtime, calculating angles and risks. What exactly do you want, Amber? Money? Is this some kind of blackmail? I laughed, the sound harsh in the tense room. I don't want your money. I have my own successful business, a life I built from nothing after nearly dying. What I want is acknowledgement of what you all did, before and after my accident. You can't just reappear and make these wild accusations, my mother insisted. There are legal implications. The insurance. Ah yes, the insurance money, I interrupted. The $500,000 policy you collected and immediately invested in Dad's business. The money that helped secure those government contracts through some rather questionable connections, according to my research. My father's face darkened. You're on dangerous ground. Am I? Because I've shared everything I've found with my lawyer. This was a bluff, I had no lawyer, just Claire's journalist friend who'd helped with research. The fraudulent insurance claim is just the beginning. There's also the question of how Sullivan Construction suddenly qualified for contracts reserved for companies that have experienced significant hardship. The study door opened, interrupting my father's brewing response. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit entered without knocking, his expression grave. "James, we need to talk. Now." He glanced at me, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Miss Sullivan. I'm Gerald Warren from the State Contracts Board. Your return from the dead is quite remarkable." My father's face went from red to gray. I hadn't planned this part, had no idea who this man was or how he'd learned of my presence so quickly. But sometimes karma creates its own perfect moments. "Gerald, this isn't what it looks like," my father began. "It looks like insurance fraud and contract misrepresentation at minimum," Warren replied coolly. "We'll need to conduct a full investigation." As my father and Warren engaged in tense, hushed conversation by the door, Cassandra approached me, her perfect day in shambles around her. "Why now?" she asked, her voice small. "Why today?" I looked at my sister, still beautiful even with mascara streaking her cheeks, still the girl I'd taught to tie her shoes and read bedtime stories to. For a moment, I felt a flicker of regret for the timing, if not the action itself. "I needed you all to see me," I said simply. "To know that I survived despite being discarded. That I built a life without any of you. That I'm not erased." In that moment, standing in my father's study surrounded by the wreckage of my former family, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had faced my ghosts and spoken my truth. Whatever happened next, legal investigations, family fallout, media attention, would unfold without my participation. My part was done. I turned to Claire, nodding slightly. It was time to go. "Goodbye," I said to the room at large. "I won't be in touch." As Claire and I walked out through the wedding reception, past bewildered guests and hurriedly whispering servers, I didn't look back. The Boston sunset painted the sky in shades of fire and gold, a fitting backdrop for the day when Amber Sullivan finally laid her old self to rest. The Boston Globe headline appeared 3 weeks after the wedding: "Sullivan Construction under investigation following insurance fraud allegations." I read it on my tablet in my Portland apartment, a cup of coffee cooling beside me. The article detailed the opening of a state investigation into my father's company, specifically regarding the insurance claim filed after my death and subsequent government contracts secured under hardship provisions. I hadn't intended to trigger a legal investigation, but I wasn't surprised. Gerald Warren's appearance at the wedding suggested someone had already been looking into Sullivan Construction. My reappearance had simply accelerated the process. Claire forwarded me links to Boston Society blogs documenting the aftermath. My parents had released a brief statement claiming they had been misled about their daughter's fate and were processing this shocking development privately. No mention of their reaction upon seeing me alive, or the years of leveraging my supposed death for gain. The investigation into my father's business dealings expanded rapidly. Former employees came forward with allegations of corner-cutting on government projects. Financial journalists uncovered questionable connections between Sullivan Construction and certain state officials. What had begun as an insurance fraud inquiry was becoming a full-scale corruption investigation. By summer's end, Sullivan Construction stock had plummeted. Contracts were suspended pending investigation results. My father's carefully constructed empire began crumbling under scrutiny. I followed these developments with detached interest, like watching a movie about strangers. The family that had shaped my early life now existed only in news headlines and the occasional therapy session. Dr. Martinez helped me process the complex emotions surrounding the confrontation and its aftermath. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked during one session. I considered the question carefully. Not vindicated exactly. More, confirmed. Everything I suspected about their true feelings was confirmed in that moment when my father asked why I was still alive. "And how do you feel about the consequences they're facing now?" "I didn't set out for revenge," I said truthfully. "But I also don't feel sorry for them. Everything happening now is the result of choices they made, choices that began long before I reappeared." In early October, 6 months after the wedding, my phone displayed a number I didn't recognize with a Boston area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? Amber? The voice was hesitant, tearful. It's Cassandra. My sister's voice after so long sent an unexpected jolt through me. I said nothing, waiting. Please don't hang up, she continued, words tumbling out in a rush. I know I have no right to call you, but everything's falling apart here, and I needed to talk to you. What do you want, Cassandra? I kept my voice neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. She drew a shaky breath. Jason left. After the investigation started and Dad's company began losing contracts. He said he couldn't handle the stress and moved to Chicago. Her bitter laugh held no humor. Turns out he was more interested in the Sullivan connections than in me. I felt a distant pang of sympathy but no surprise. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Because you were right, she whispered. About everything. Jason, Mom and Dad, how they used your death. I've had months to think about it all, and I'm so ashamed, Amber. What we did to you was unforgivable. I sat down on my couch, unexpectedly affected by her words. For years, I'd imagined confronting my family, forcing them to acknowledge their betrayal. Now that it was happening, I felt strangely hollow. It was unforgivable, I agreed softly. I know. Her voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you that I see it now, what kind of person I was, what kind of family we were. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me about the investigation's expansion, my father's stress-induced health problems, my mother's social ostracism. The perfect Sullivan facade had shattered completely. Cassandra herself had moved out of the family home, renting a small apartment and finding work at a local magazine, her first real job. I'd like to see you someday, she said tentatively before we ended the call. When you're ready, if you're ever ready. No pressure, just, the door is open. I made no promises but thanked her for calling. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment, processing this unexpected development. Cassandra's apology couldn't erase the past, but it represented something I hadn't anticipated, the possibility that people could change when forced to confront their actions. Life in Portland continued its pleasant rhythm. My design business thrived, expanding to require 2 full-time employees. Claire and Marcus remained my closest friends, joined now by Michael, whose patient support during the wedding confrontation and its aftermath had deepened our relationship. In December, I held my first major art exhibition at a respected Portland gallery. The collection, titled Submersion and Emergence, featured abstract works inspired by my near-death experience and subsequent rebirth. The show received positive reviews in local arts publications, with critics noting the powerful emotional journey from darkness to resilience evident in the progression of pieces. At the opening night reception, surrounded by friends and admirers of my work, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This success belonged entirely to me, not to the Sullivan name or connections, but to Amber Lawrence, the woman who had built herself from nothing after nearly drowning. Michael found me by the feature piece, a large canvas dominated by stormy blues giving way to emerging gold light. Proud of you, he said, handing me a glass of champagne. This is incredible. Thank you for being here, I replied. For being part of all this. Later that night, after the gallery had emptied and we were walking home through Portland's gentle winter rain, Michael stopped under a streetlight and took my hands. I've been thinking, he said, uncharacteristically nervous. This past year has shown me how strong you are, how resilient. I love that about you, and, well, I love you. All of you, Amber Sullivan, Amber Lawrence, whoever you decide to be tomorrow. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside was a simple emerald ring, my favorite stone, not a diamond. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, he continued. Just for you to consider a future together, whatever that looks like. I looked at this kind, honest man who had accepted my complicated history without judgment. Who had held me through nightmares and celebrated my successes. who had never once made me feel that I needed to be anyone but myself. Yes, I said simply, the decision easier than I'd imagined. I'd like that future very much. Spring brought new developments from Boston. My father's company had filed for bankruptcy protection following the loss of major contracts and mounting legal fees. Criminal charges were being considered by the state attorney general's office. My mother had retreated from public life entirely, reportedly seeking treatment for anxiety and depression. Cassandra called occasionally, our conversations gradually becoming less awkward. She had started therapy, was dating a kindergarten teacher with no connections to Boston high society, and was slowly building an independent life. I maintained cautious distance but no longer felt the burning anger that had once consumed me. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" Michael asked one evening as we discussed my latest call with Cassandra. "With my parents?" "No," I said with certainty. "That bridge is thoroughly burned. With Cassandra, maybe, someday. Not as the sisters we once were, but perhaps as something new." By summer, I had legally changed my name to Amber Sullivan, reclaiming part of my original identity while honoring the woman I had become. The hyphenation felt right, acknowledging my past without being defined by it. My second art exhibition opened in Seattle, expanding my reputation beyond Portland. Michael and I bought a craftsman bungalow in a leafy neighborhood, adopting a rescue dog named Murphy in honor of the golden retriever who had found me on that beach years ago. We planned a small wedding for the following spring, just close friends, with Cassandra potentially on the guest list. Life settled into a pattern of fulfilling work, loving relationships, and peaceful evenings. The nightmares faded completely. In therapy, Dr. Martinez and I began discussing termination. Not because I was cured, but because I had developed the tools to navigate my past and future on my own terms. "You've done remarkable work," she said during one of our final sessions. "Not many people could transform such trauma into growth." "I had help," I acknowledged. "Not just from you, but from everyone who saw value in me when my own family didn't." She smiled. "That's the thing about family, sometimes we have to create our own." Walking home that evening, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had felt world-ending. The accident that should have killed me. The new beginning that rose from those ashes. Karma had indeed come full circle, though not in the vengeful way I might once have imagined. My family had lost their carefully constructed facade, their social standing, their financial security, not because I had sought revenge, but because their own actions couldn't withstand scrutiny once exposed to light. Meanwhile, I had gained what they never truly valued: authenticity, genuine connections, work that fulfilled me, love based on who I really was rather than what I represented. As I turned onto my street, I saw Michael on our porch swing, Murphy at his feet, both waiting for my return. This was home. This was family, chosen and cherished, built on truth rather than appearance. I had nearly drowned in that Atlantic storm, but something essential had survived, the core of who I was, washed clean of others' expectations and judgments. That night had stripped everything away, forcing me to rebuild from nothing. In losing everything, I had found myself. The karma wasn't that my family suffered for their actions. The karma was that I flourished despite them. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or loss? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who don't value you, even if they're family. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength after hardship. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one.